A single mother slept in her car with 3 children night after night. She didn't call the police. She didn't call a shelter. She didn't call anyone. Then one night, a billionaire's driver knocked on her window, but it wasn't for the reason she expected. What happened next would change both of their lives in ways neither of them was prepared for. Imani Okoro was 34 years old. She worked as a certified nursing assistant at Riverside Elder Care in Memphis, Tennessee. 5 days a week, she clocked in, changed adult diapers, lifted patients twice her weight, rubbed lavender lotion into hands that had forgotten how to hold things, and spoke softly to people whose own families had stopped visiting. She earned $14.50 an hour, no benefits, no overtime, no sick days she could actually afford to take. She had 3 children. Malik was 10, quiet, watchful, the kind of boy who noticed things other kids his age didn't notice. Like when his mother skipped dinner and said she wasn't hungry, or when she checked her phone with that particular look that meant a bill was due and the money wasn't there. Malik carried things he never talked about. He had learned early that silence was a kind of protection. Layla was 7. She drew constantly. Butterflies, houses, families standing in front yards with trees that looked like lollipops. She asked questions the way children do without understanding that some of them didn't have good answers. "Where's Daddy? When are we getting a dog? Can I have my own room someday?" Ezra was 3. He laughed at everything. He cried hard and forgave instantly. He had no idea what was happening around him, and Imani intended to keep it that way for as long as she possibly could. Their father, Darius, left when Ezra was 4 months old. He didn't leave for another woman. He didn't leave because of drugs or crime or any of the things people assumed when they heard the story. He left because he said the pressure was too much. 3 kids, 1 income that wasn't enough, bills that multiplied faster than they could be paid. He said he needed space to figure himself out. He never came back. Imani didn't waste energy hating him. Hate required time she didn't have. She had been doing this alone for almost 3 years now. Waking up alone, problem solving alone, falling asleep in the dark, running numbers in her head alone. She had gotten used to it the way a person gets used to a limp. You stop noticing after a while. It just becomes how you walk. The landlord sold this building. Imani found the notice taped to her door when she got home from a long shift. 30 days, no exceptions, no extensions. She called every affordable listing in Memphis that week. First month, last month, security deposit, $3,600 minimum for anything with 2 bedrooms and working heat. She had $312 in her checking account. She had already borrowed from everyone she could borrow from. There was no one left to call. On the last day of the month, she loaded what she could fit into her 2009 Honda Civic. 187,000 miles on the odometer. Rust along the wheel wells, a crack in the windshield that had been there since before Malik was born. She folded the back seats down and laid out a thin blanket, 3 small backpacks, a bag of snacks from Dollar General, granola bars, juice boxes, animal crackers, baby wipes, a change of clothes for each child. That was everything. That car became their home. Her scrubs still smelled like the lavender lotion she rubbed into Mr. Henderson's hands every morning at Riverside. She still showed up to work, still smiled, still lifted, cleaned, comforted, and cared for people who had no idea that the woman gently adjusting their pillows had slept in a parking lot the night before. She organized life inside that car like a system. Malik sat in the front passenger seat once the younger ones fell asleep. Layla held Ezra in the back on the folded blanket. Imani slept last, always last, after checking every lock, after scanning every shadow outside the windows, after making sure each child was breathing evenly and covered and still. "My kids don't know we're homeless," she told herself, staring at the parking lot lights through the windshield. "They think we're camping." She held on to that sentence like a rope over a canyon. As long as her children believed they were on an adventure, she hadn't failed them yet. Night after night, the cold settled deeper. Imani was not a woman who asked for help. She was not a woman who cried in front of her children. She was not a woman who believed the world owed her anything. She was a woman who showed up every single day, regardless. That, as it turned out, was both her greatest strength and the reason no one knew she was drowning. She pulled into the Walmart parking lot, chose a spot near the back, away from the entrance lights, but close enough to the main road that she wouldn't feel completely isolated. She turned off the engine. The heat died within minutes. Malik sat in the passenger seat, his backpack on his lap, watching her. He hadn't asked a single question since they loaded the car that afternoon. Not where they were going, not why they weren't going to Auntie Lena's, not why Imani had packed blankets instead of suitcases. He just watched. "We're going to do something fun tonight," Imani said, keeping her voice bright and steady. "We're going camping, a little family adventure." Layla's face lit up from the back seat. "Like real camping." "Just like real camping," Imani said. Ezra clapped his hands because Layla was excited, and at 3 years old, that was all the reason he needed. Imani spread the blanket across the folded back seats. She arranged the backpacks as pillows. She tucked Layla and Ezra together under the thickest cover she had, a fleece throw from the apartment that still smelled faintly like home. She handed Layla a juice box and Ezra a cracker and told them both a story about a bear who lived in the woods and hosted a party for all the forest animals every Friday night. Ezra was asleep before the bear sent out invitations. Layla lasted until the raccoon brought potato salad. Then she was out too. Imani sat in the driver's seat. The cold crept in slowly, first through the floor, then through the windows, then through her clothes. She pulled her jacket tighter. She locked the doors. She checked the mirrors. She did not sleep. Malik didn't sleep either. He sat in the passenger seat for a long time, staring out the window at nothing. Then he turned to her. "Mom." "Yeah, baby." He paused. She could see him choosing his words carefully, the way he always did, the way no 10-year-old should have to. "This is a nice camping spot," he said quietly. He knew. She knew he knew. Neither of them said it. The nights grew harder. One night, Ezra woke up crying, the kind that meant he was cold, deep cold, the kind that settles into small bones faster than adult ones. Imani took off her jacket, her only jacket, a thin navy blue puffer she had bought at Goodwill 3 winters ago. "Oh, will." She wrapped it around Ezra, tucking it under and around him until he looked like a small blue cocoon. He stopped crying. His breathing slowed. He pressed his face into the fabric and found sleep again. Imani sat in the driver's seat in her scrub top. No jacket, no blanket. She wrapped her arms around herself and shivered until her jaw ached. She did not take the jacket back. "Mom, when are we going home?" Layla asked the next morning, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Soon, baby. We're on an adventure." The words came out steady, practiced, airtight. The struggle deepened. Imani dropped the children at the Memphis Public Library on Poplar Avenue in the morning. It was the only place she could think of that was free, warm, and open all day. She gave Malik the backpack with snacks, juice boxes, and baby wipes. She gave him her phone number written on a piece of paper, even though he had it memorized, because holding something concrete felt safer than trusting memory when you're 10 years old and responsible for 2 younger siblings. "You're in charge, baby," she said, kneeling to his level. "Keep them in the children's section. Don't leave the building. I'll be back by evening." Malik nodded. No argument, no complaint. He took Layla's hand in one of his and Ezra's hand in the other and walked inside like a man walking into a job he didn't apply for but couldn't afford to quit. Imani drove to Riverside Eldercare and worked a full shift, changed sheets, cleaned wounds, spooned food into mouths that couldn't chew without help, held the hand of a 91-year-old woman named Miss Bernice who called her baby and told her she had kind eyes. When she walked back into the library that evening, she found them exactly where she had left them. Layla was asleep on a chair, her head resting on a picture book about dolphins. Ezra was in Malik's lap, clutching an empty sippy cup, his diaper heavy and unchanged because Malik didn't have supplies and didn't want to ask a stranger. Malik looked up at his mother with eyes that were too old for his face. "We're fine, Mom." He ate all his crackers. She finished her book. Fine. The word children use when they've learned that the truth is something adults can't handle. Imani picked up Ezra, changed him in the library bathroom, heated a bottle of milk in the microwave at the back of the library cafe, fed him, cleaned Layla's face with a baby wipe, carried them both to the car. She sat in the driver's seat, looked at the gas gauge, looked at her phone, looked at the rearview mirror, 3 children settling into position for another night in a Honda Civic. The system was holding, barely, but the threads were showing. One night, the car died 2 blocks from the church parking lot on Lamar Avenue, just stopped. The engine coughed once and went quiet like it had been holding on as long as it could, and finally decided it was done. Imani sat in the dark, hands on the wheel, engine silent, 3 children asleep behind her. She got out of the car, walked to the back, put her hands against the trunk, and started pushing. A Honda Civic weighs about 2,900 pounds. Imani weighed 138. She pushed anyway. One foot in front of the other, palms flat against cold metal, breath coming out in white clouds, arms shaking, legs burning. Teeth clenched against the kind of exhaustion that lives deeper than muscles. She heard the passenger door open, footsteps on asphalt, then small hands pressed against the trunk beside hers. Malik, 10 years old, standing beside his mother at night, pushing a car that weighed 20 times what he did. Neither of them spoke. They pushed together in silence down Lamar Avenue until they reached the church lot. Imani put the car in park. Malik climbed back inside. Neither of them acknowledged what had just happened. Some things don't need words. Some things are too heavy for them. Night after night, Imani sat in the car while her children slept and made phone calls. The shelters were full, wait lists stretched for months. She dialed her older sister Lena, the last thread. Lena answered, voice heavy with sleep. Hey, Tam, what's going on? Imani opened her mouth. Nothing came out at first. Then quietly, like a confession she had been holding inside, she said, Lena, I need help. We don't have anywhere to go. I've been sleeping in the car with the kids. Silence on the other end. A long, terrible silence. Imani, Lena said, and her voice cracked in a way that told Imani everything before the words arrived. I can't take 4 more people. I'm barely making it myself. The apartment is 1 bedroom. I'm already behind on rent. I want to help you. I just don't have the room. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't indifference. It was a woman drowning in 4 feet of water telling another woman drowning in 5 that she couldn't pull her out without going under herself. Imani said she understood. She said it was okay. She said she'd figure something out. She hung up. The car was silent except for Ezra's slow breathing and the occasional rustle of Layla turning under the blanket and the distant hum of a city that didn't know she existed. For the first time in those long nights, Imani cried, but not out loud. She couldn't cry out loud. If she made a sound, Malik would wake up. And if Malik woke up, he'd see her. And if he saw her, he'd know that the camping trip was over and the adventure was a lie and his mother didn't have a plan. So she cried the only way she could, through her breathing, long, slow, controlled breaths, each one carrying the weight of everything she had been holding, her chest shaking, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her jaw locked tight. She cried in silence, then stopped, wiped her face with the back of her hand, checked the mirrors, checked the locks, checked her children, still sleeping, still safe, still believing in a camping trip that never existed. She was still showing up to work every morning to take care of other people's families because that's what Imani Okoro did. She showed up even when no one showed up for her. 1,200 miles from that church parking lot in Memphis, in a penthouse on the 42nd floor of a glass tower overlooking downtown Atlanta, a man named Elias Kwame Adeyemi sat in an office that most people would call beautiful and felt absolutely nothing. He was 52 years old, CEO of Adeyemi Capital Group, a real estate investment firm valued at $4.2 billion. He owned commercial properties in 12 states, affordable housing developments in 6 cities, and 2 hotels that travel magazines wrote about using words like exclusive and visionary. His face had been on the cover of Black Enterprise twice. His name appeared in Forbes annually. His signature on a contract could rearrange the skyline of an American city, and none of it had meant anything to him in 3 years. Elias grew up on the south side of Chicago in a 2-bedroom apartment on 63rd Street that smelled like palm oil and bleach, and the particular exhaustion of a woman working 2 jobs to keep 1 child alive. His mother, Folik Adeyemi, worked nights as a nurse's aide at Cook County Hospital and days cleaning office buildings downtown. She left before Elias woke and came home after he was supposed to be asleep. He heard her in the kitchen at midnight. Shoes off, feet swollen, eating rice standing up because sitting down meant she might not get back up. His father died when Elias was 9. Heart attack on a construction site in Cicero. No life insurance, no savings. Just a funeral that Folake paid for with money she didn't have, and a boy who stopped being a child the moment he understood what loss really meant. Elias remembered one night with absolute clarity. His mother picked him up from school in their car, a rusted Oldsmobile with a cracked dashboard and a passenger door that didn't lock right. She didn't drive home. She drove to the parking lot behind the grocery store on Halstead. She turned off the engine. She looked at him. "We're going to sleep here tonight, baby. Just tonight." That night stretched on. Folake drove him to school every morning and told him not to tell anyone. She washed his uniform in the bathroom at the gas station. She braided his hair in the front seat using a comb she kept in the glove box. She never once cried in front of him, but he heard her late at night when she thought he was asleep. Small sounds, muffled, controlled, the sound of a woman trying to hold the world together with two hands and failing only in the dark where no one could see. Elias never forgot that sound. He built his entire career on top of it. Every dollar he earned, every building he bought, every deal he closed was laid over that memory, like concrete over a crack. Cover it, build on it, never go back. He had succeeded beyond anything Folake could have imagined. He had pulled himself out. He had pulled his mother out. He had put her in a 3-bedroom house in Hyde Park with a garden and a nurse and every comfort a 78-year-old woman could want. But 3 years ago, the thing he had built cracked. His daughter, Serena, 29 years old, a registered nurse at Grady Memorial in Atlanta. Bright, stubborn, relentless. She had her grandmother's eyes and her grandmother's hands and her grandmother's absolute refusal to walk past suffering without stopping. Serena volunteered at 2 shelters. She spent her weekends there reading to children, helping mothers fill out housing applications, braiding little girls' hair the way Folake used to braid Elias's in the front seat of that Oldsmobile. She told Elias once, sitting across from him in his office with her feet up on his expensive desk, "Dad, you know what I love about nursing? You get to hold someone's hand on their worst day. Not fix it, just hold it." She died on a Wednesday. Car accident on Interstate 85. A truck driver fell asleep. It was that simple. It was that permanent. Elias built 2 homeless shelters in her name, signed the checks, approved the designs, attended the ribbon cuttings, shook hands, smiled for cameras. He never once stepped inside either building because every woman in those shelters would look like Serena. Every child would sound like Serena. Every pair of hands holding a stranger's hand on their worst day would remind him of the daughter he couldn't hold on hers. So he helped from a distance, through systems, through foundations, through accountants and program directors and quarterly reports. He moved money towards suffering without ever having to look at it directly. It was easier that way, cleaner, safer. His driver, Leroy Jefferson, everyone called CJ, was the only person who saw through it. CJ was 61, former Marine, 14 years behind the wheel of Elias's car. He had served 2 tours in Iraq, come home to a country that didn't have a place for him, and spent 8 months sleeping in a van behind a gas station in College Park before Elias hired him. CJ didn't talk much. He didn't need to. He had the kind of presence that made conversation optional. When he did speak, it landed. No filler, no performance, just the blunt, unhurried truth of a man who had already lost everything once and discovered that the world didn't end. He was the only person who ever called Elias by his first name without being invited to. The only one who would look him in the eye and say what no board member, no executive, no financial advisor would dare to say. CJ watched Elias avoid those shelters for 3 years, watched him sign checks and skip visits, watched him build something in his daughter's name and then refuse to stand inside it. He never said a word about it, not once. He was waiting. For what exactly he couldn't have told you, but he'd know it when he saw it. The Memphis trip was supposed to be routine. Elias flew in to inspect a mixed-use development his company was building on the edge of the medical district. 48 affordable housing units above a ground-floor grocery store, the kind of project that looked good in annual reports and made investors feel like they were doing something meaningful while still turning a profit. Elias had approved the blueprints months ago. He hadn't visited the site once. CJ picked him up at Memphis International in the black Escalade and drove east toward downtown. Elias sat in the back, answering emails, not looking out the window. Memphis rolled past him unnoticed. They finished the site visit. Elias wanted to go straight to the hotel. CJ took a different route. "I need gas," CJ said, turning onto Lamar Avenue. Elias didn't look up from his phone. "Fine." CJ pulled into a Shell station 2 blocks from a small church with a sign out front that read, "All are welcome." He got out, swiped a card, started the pump, then stood there, not pumping, not moving, just looking at something across the street. A Honda Civic sat in the church parking lot. Old rusted wheel wells, cracked windshield. The windows were fogged from the inside, condensation on every pane. The kind of fog that only forms when people are breathing inside a closed car for hours. CJ had seen that fog before. He had made that fog himself. He crossed the street slowly, not rushing, the way you approach something fragile. The parking lot was dark except for a single floodlight on the church wall that cast everything in pale yellow. He could see shapes through the fog, small shapes, children, and in the driver's seat, a figure sitting upright, arms crossed over her chest, not moving. CJ stopped beside the driver's side window. He stood there for a moment, close enough to hear the faint hum of breathing inside. Then he raised his hand and knocked gently. 2 knocks. The way you knock on a door you're not sure you should be opening. The figure in the driver's seat flinched hard. Her hand shot to the gear shift. Her body twisted toward the back seat, instinctively placing herself between the window and the shapes behind her. CJ stepped back. 1 full step. He raised both hands, palms open, fingers spread. He held them there, visible, unthreatening. The posture of a man who understood that a woman sleeping in a car with children had every reason to be afraid of anyone who came to her window in the dark. Through the fog, Imani's face appeared. She wiped a small circle on the glass with her sleeve and looked out. Her eyes were red but dry, exhausted but alert. The eyes of someone who hadn't truly slept in many nights. CJ didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't try to look friendly. He just stood there with his hands up and waited for her to decide whether to crack the window or start the engine. She cracked the window an inch. "I'm not bothering anyone," she said immediately. Her voice was rough, automatic. The same sentence she had said to the Walmart security guard nights ago. "We'll be gone in the morning." CJ didn't move. "How long?" he asked. His voice was quiet, not soft, not gentle. Quiet. The voice of a man who was asking a question he already knew the answer to. Imani's jaw tightened. "We are fine." "I didn't ask if you're fine. I asked, how long?" Silence. The car's engine ticked in the cold. Somewhere behind Imani, one of the children stirred. A small sound, the sound of a body shifting under a thin blanket. "Several nights," Imani said. CJ looked at her for a long moment. His eyes moved to the back seat. He couldn't see clearly through the fog, but he could count. 3 shapes, small, one of them very small. He nodded once. Then he turned around and walked back across the street. Imani watched him go. She expected that. People looked. People asked. People walked away. That was the pattern. That was always the pattern. CJ walked to the Escalade. He opened the rear passenger door. Elias was still looking at his phone, the screen casting blue light across his face. CJ leaned in. His voice was steady. "There's a woman in that car with 3 kids. She's wearing nurse scrubs. She's been out here several nights." Elias's thumb stopped scrolling. He didn't look up immediately. His hand just froze, hovering over the screen the way a body freezes when it hears something it wasn't ready for. CJ waited. Elias looked up. His face was unreadable, the face of a man who had spent 3 decades learning how to keep his reactions behind glass. "What do you want me to do about it?" The question wasn't cold, it wasn't dismissive. It was the question of a man who had been avoiding exactly this moment for 3 years and knew it. CJ didn't blink. "I don't want you to do anything. I'm telling you what is there." He closed the door, walked back to the pump, finished fueling, got in the driver's seat, started the engine. The Escalade sat in the gas station lot, engine running, heat blowing, Elias in the back seat. The Honda Civic 50 yards away, fogged windows, 3 children, a woman in scrubs who had been sleeping upright for many nights. Elias stared at the Civic through the Escalade's tinted glass. His chest felt tight. Not the tightness of a heart attack or anxiety, the tightness of something pressing against a wall he had built a long time ago, pressing slowly, steadily, the way water presses against a dam before the first crack appears. He thought about his mother, Faux Lake in the Oldsmobile, the grocery store parking lot on Halstead. "We're going to sleep here tonight, baby. Just tonight." He thought about Serena, scrubs, shelter, holding someone's hand on their worst day. "Dad, you don't have to fix it. You just have to show up." He thought about 2 shelters with his daughter's name on the front that he had never stepped inside, 2 buildings he had paid for and run from, 2 attempts to honor her memory without actually doing the one thing she would have wanted him to do. Look at it. Stand in front of it. Don't turn away. Elias opened his door. The night air hit him immediately. Cold, damp. His shoes, handmade Italian leather, touched asphalt that was cracked and oil-stained and nothing like the polished floors he walked on every day. He crossed the street. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of the cold, but because of what was on the other side. CJ watched from the Escalade. He didn't follow. He didn't need to. He had done his part. He had pointed. The rest was Elias's. Elias reached the Honda Civic. He stood where CJ had stood. He looked at the fogged windows. He could hear breathing inside. Small breaths. The breathing of children who had learned to sleep in small spaces. He raised his hand, then stopped. His daughter's voice, clear as a phone call. "Dad, you just have to show up." He knocked. Imani's face appeared at the window again. She had barely settled back down from CJ's visit. Now someone else. Her expression shifted from fear to confusion to the particular kind of weariness that comes from being disappointed so many times that hope itself becomes suspicious. She cracked the window again. Same inch. Elias looked at her. She looked at him. Two strangers in a church parking lot at night in Memphis, separated by 1 inch of open window and everything else. Elias didn't introduce himself as a CEO, didn't mention his company, didn't reach for his wallet. He said the only thing that came to his mind, the only thing that felt true enough to say to a woman he didn't know who was sleeping in a car with 3 children. "My mother was a nurse too, CNA at Cook County Hospital in Chicago. She worked nights." Imani blinked. Whatever she had expected him to say, it wasn't that. Elias continued, his voice low, unhurried. "She raised me alone after my father died. There was a stretch when I was about 11 where we slept in her car, a parking lot behind a grocery store. She told me it was just for 1 night." He paused. The memory moved through him like cold water. "It wasn't 1 night." Imani stared at him. Her hand, which had been gripping the window crank, loosened slightly. Not trust, not yet, but the absence of immediate fear, which was as close to trust as a woman in her position could get. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I heard you've been out here several nights," Elias said. "And I know what that feels like when there's no next night planned." Imani's throat moved. She didn't speak. Elias reached into his coat, not for a wallet, for a business card. Thick paper, raised letters, a phone number. He held it at the edge of the open window. "There's a hotel room booked for tonight. Marriott on Union Avenue. 2 beds. It's already paid for. Your name is at the front desk. Take your children somewhere warm. Sleep in a real bed. Tomorrow morning, if you want, we can talk about what happens next. If you don't want to, throw this card away, and I'll never come back. Your choice. No conditions. No strings." Imani looked at the card, then at him, then at the back seat where 3 children were curled together under a blanket that wasn't thick enough for a Memphis winter. "How do I know this isn't a trick?" she said. Her voice wasn't hostile. It was tired. The question of a woman who had learned that people who offered help usually wanted something. "You don't," Elias said. "I'm a stranger. You have every reason not to trust me. All I can tell you is that my mother slept in a car with me 40 years ago, and nobody knocked on her window. I'm knocking on yours." Silence. A long one. Imani's eyes moved between the card in the back seat and the man standing in the dark outside her window. Then Ezra coughed. Not a big cough, a small one. The wet, rattling cough of a 3-year-old whose lungs had been breathing cold air for too long. The kind of cough that starts small and doesn't stay small. Imani's hand moved. She took the card. Her fingers were cold and rough and trembling. And when they brushed against Elias's hand, he felt the chill in them like an accusation against every warm building he had ever owned. "My kids come first," she said. It wasn't a statement to Elias. It was a statement to herself. A compass reading. A reminder of the only principle that hadn't bent in all those hard nights. They always come first. "I know," Elias said. He stepped back. Imani looked at the card one more time. Then she started the engine. It caught on the 3rd try. She pulled out of the church parking lot slowly, the way she always drove, carefully, protectively, like the car was made of glass and everything inside it was irreplaceable. Elias stood in the empty lot and watched the taillights disappear down Lamar Avenue. The cold pressed against him. His hands were shaking, not from the temperature. CJ pulled the Escalade alongside him. Elias got in. Neither of them spoke for a full minute. Then CJ said quietly, without looking in the mirror, "Serena would have knocked first." Elias closed his eyes. Yeah, she would have. They drove to the hotel in silence. The Marriott on Union Avenue was a clean, ordinary hotel with a lobby that smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner, and the particular neutrality of a place designed to feel like nowhere in particular. Imani pulled into the parking lot. She sat in the car for a full 3 minutes before turning off the engine. She looked at the card again. She looked at the hotel. She looked at her children asleep in the back, unaware that anything had changed. Then she got out. She lifted Ezra first, his body warm and limp against her shoulder, his cough quiet for now. She woke Layla, who stumbled out half asleep, clutching the fleece blanket. Malik got out last. He stood beside the car and looked at the hotel the way a person looks at something they're not sure is real. Mom, where are we? Imani swallowed. A new camping spot, baby. A really nice one. Malik looked at her. He didn't believe her. But he picked up the backpack and followed her inside because that's what Malik did. He followed his mother even when the map didn't make sense. The woman at the front desk found the reservation immediately. Okoro, 2 queen beds, prepaid. She handed Imani 2 key cards and pointed toward the elevator with a smile that was polite and professional, and had no idea what those key cards meant to the woman receiving them. The room was on the 4th floor, room 412. Imani opened the door and stood in the doorway. 2 beds, white sheets, pillows that weren't backpacks, a heater humming warm air through a vent near the ceiling, a bathroom with a door that closed, a bathtub, soap, towels, light that came from a lamp instead of a street light. Layla walked in first. She touched the bed like it might disappear. Then she saw the bathroom. Mama, there's soap, like real soap, not the gas station kind. She said it with the wonder of a child discovering something extraordinary, because for a 7-year-old who had been washing her face with baby wipes for many nights, a bar of hotel soap was extraordinary. Ezra squirmed out of Imani's arms and crawled onto the nearest bed. He sank into the mattress. His body relaxed in a way Imani hadn't seen in a long time, every muscle letting go at once. He was asleep in seconds, the fastest he had fallen asleep since the apartment, because for the first time in many nights, the surface beneath him wasn't a car seat covered with a thin blanket. It was a bed, a real bed, the kind of thing most people never think about because they've never had to. Malik walked in last. He set his backpack on the floor. He looked at the room, the beds, the lamp, the curtains, the heater. Then he sat down on the floor, back against the bed, knees up, and he cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just tears running down his face in 2 quiet lines, while his shoulders shook and his hands gripped his knees, and many nights of being brave finally found somewhere safe enough to end. Imani sat down beside him. She didn't say, "It's okay." She didn't say, "Don't cry." She didn't say anything. She put her arm around him and pulled him close and held him the way she had wanted to hold him for many nights, but couldn't, because holding him meant admitting they needed holding, and admitting that meant the camping trip was over. The camping trip was over. They sat together on the floor of room 412 while Layla explored the bathroom, and Ezra slept on a real mattress, and the heater pushed warm air into every corner of a room that felt for the first time in many nights like the world had walls. Outside in the Escalade parked in the hotel lot, CJ called Elias. "The kids are inside. They're warm." Elias sat in his hotel room 12 blocks away, phone pressed to his ear. "Good," he said. He hung up. He sat on the edge of his bed, a room that cost hundreds a night, with sheets that thread count advertisements were written about in a hotel he partially owned. And for the first time in 3 years, Elias Kwame Adeyemi cried. Not the controlled private grief he had learned to manage. The other kind. The kind that starts in your stomach and rises through your chest and comes out as a sound you don't recognize as your own. He wasn't crying for Imani. He wasn't crying for her children. He was crying for Serena. For the daughter, who would have been the first person to cross that street and knock on that window. For 3 years of building shelters he couldn't enter and signing checks that kept his hands clean and his heart untouched. For the distance he had put between himself and every person who reminded him of what he had lost. Serena's voice clear, steady, the way she always sounded when she was telling him something he didn't want to hear. "Dad, you don't have to fix it. You just have to show up." He had shown up tonight, for the first time in 3 years, and it had broken him open in exactly the way he had been afraid it would. But broken open, he was starting to realize, was not the same as broken. Elias arrived at the Marriott the next morning. He carried 2 cups of coffee and a bag from a bakery on Beale Street. Muffins, croissants, a chocolate chip cookie the size of a child's face that he had picked specifically because he imagined a 7-year-old would find it extraordinary. He was right. Layla held the cookie with both hands and looked at it like it contained the secrets of the universe. Imani opened the door, wearing the same scrubs from the night before. She had washed them in the hotel bathroom sink and dried them over the heater vent. They were wrinkled but clean. Her face was different, not transformed, not glowing, just straighter, the posture of a person who had slept horizontally for the first time in many nights. Small difference, enormous distance. She took the coffee with both hands, held it close, inhaled the steam the way a person inhales a memory they thought they had lost. "Real coffee," she said quietly, "from an actual place. I forgot what that smelled like." They sat at the small table by the window while Ezra played with the TV remote, and Layla ate her cookie in methodical bites, saving the chocolate chips for last. Malik sat on the bed watching Elias with steady, evaluating eyes. Not hostile, not afraid, just watching, the way he always watched, measuring. Elias didn't start with a plan. He started with a question. "Tell me what happened." Imani set down her coffee. She looked at him for a moment, deciding how much to give a stranger. Then she decided that a man who told her about his mother sleeping in a car at a grocery store parking lot had already given her something, and maybe she owed him the same honesty back. She told him everything: the landlord selling the building, the 30-day notice, the math that didn't work, $14.50 an hour, $3,600 to move, $312 in the bank, the Walmart parking lot, the security guard, the church, the library, the milk or gas decision, pushing the car at night, the shelters that were full, the sister who couldn't help. She told it all without self-pity, without performance, just facts laid out in order, the way a nurse charts a patient's decline, clinical, clear, exhausted. "You know what the worst part is?" she said, looking down at her coffee. "It's not being homeless. It's that I did everything right. I went to work. I paid my bills, I raised my kids, I didn't do drugs, I didn't make bad decisions. I just didn't make enough money. And somehow that's enough to end up in a car." She paused. "You start thinking it's your fault, that you missed something, that if you'd been smarter or worked harder or saved more, this wouldn't have happened. And you know that's not true. But knowing and feeling are 2 different things." "Art Sunday mainesti all minimais." Elias looked at her. He didn't say, "I understand." He didn't say, "It's not your fault." Those were things people said to make themselves feel better about someone else's pain. Instead, he said, "My mother said the exact same thing, almost word for word. She told me once, years later, that the hardest part of sleeping in that car wasn't the cold. It was believing she deserved it." Imani met his eyes. For the first time, something passed between them that wasn't gratitude or charity or the awkward distance between someone who has and someone who doesn't. It was recognition, the specific, quiet recognition of 2 people who had lived in the same room just 40 years apart. Elias set down his coffee. "I'm going to say something, and I want you to hear all of it before you respond. Can you do that?" Imani nodded. "I'm not offering you money. I'm not offering you a handout. I'm not trying to save you. You don't need saving. You need a foundation, something solid to stand on, so you can start building again. Here's what I can offer. A period of support. An apartment in one of the affordable housing units my company manages here in Memphis. Subsidized, not free. Childcare through a program we partner with, so you don't have to leave your children in a library. And time. Time to get your LPN certification. You're a CNA making $14.50 an hour. LPNs in Memphis start around $24, $25 an hour with benefits. There are accelerated programs. You're already halfway qualified. You just need the space to finish." He paused. "I'm not giving you a new life, Imani. I'm giving you a period of support to build one. What you do with it is entirely up to you." Imani stared at him. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Why?" she said. "Out of all the people in this city sleeping in cars right now, why me?" Elias looked at Malik sitting on the bed, still watching, still measuring. He looked at Layla, chocolate on her fingers, drawing something on the hotel notepad. He looked at Ezra pressing every button on the remote with the dedication of a scientist conducting critical research. "Because my mother was you," he said, 40 years ago, Same job, same car, same math that didn't work, and nobody came for her. Nobody knocked on her window. She got out on her own, but it took years. Years she didn't have to waste. Years my childhood didn't have to lose." He paused. "And because my daughter would have been the first person across that street that night. She would have knocked before CJ did. She would have sat right where I'm sitting and said exactly what I'm saying. And she's not here to do it, so I'm doing it for her." Imani looked down at her coffee. Tears ran down her face and dripped onto the table, and she didn't wipe them away. Not because she had stopped caring, but because for the first time in many nights, she was in a room where crying was allowed. "My kids come first," she said, her voice breaking. "Whatever this is, whatever happens, they come first. They always come first." "I know," Elias said. "That's exactly why I'm here." The apartment was on the second floor of a building called Parkway Commons on South 3rd Street. 2 bedrooms, laminate floors, small windows, a kitchen with a stove that worked, and a refrigerator that hummed, and cabinets that were empty, but waiting. It wasn't beautiful. The carpet was builder grade. The countertops were laminate. The light fixtures were the kind that come standard in every affordable unit in every city in America, but it had a lock on the front door. It had heat that came through vents in the ceiling. It had walls that didn't move. Imani carried Ezra in first. He was asleep on her shoulder, his face pressed against her neck, his breathing slow and even. Layla walked in behind her, spinning in the middle of the living room, arms out, testing how much space there was. "This is ours, all of it," Imani said. Layla ran to the kitchen, opened every cabinet, counted the drawers, turned the faucet on and off 3 times just to watch the water come out. "Mama, the water works." She said it like she was reporting a miracle. Malik stood at the door to the smaller bedroom. He didn't go in right away. He stood there, one hand on the frame, looking at the empty room. A window, a closet, carpet, nothing else. But it was his. "This is mine?" he asked, turning to Imani. "Yours." He didn't say anything else. He walked inside. He touched the wall with his palm flat like he was checking if it was real. Then he closed the door, gently. Not a slam, a careful, deliberate close. The sound of a boy choosing privacy for the first time in his life. Imani heard crying through the door. Small, quiet, the way Malik always cried. She put her hand on the doorknob, then she took it off. She stepped back. She let him have the one thing he had never had. A room where he could feel something without anyone watching. She stood in the hallway, hand over her mouth, tears running down her face, and let her son cry alone for the first time. Because he deserved a door that closed. Because 10-year-olds shouldn't have to be brave every single second of every single day. The next period, Imani enrolled in the accelerated LPN program at Southwest Tennessee Community College. Classes 3 evenings a week. Clinical rotations on Saturdays. She still worked her CNA shift at Riverside from morning to afternoon. She still came home, made dinner, helped Layla with homework, bathed Ezra, read stories, tucked them in. Then she studied. At the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that got cold, while she memorized medication dosages and practiced charting and learned the things that separated $14.50 an hour from $25. CJ drove the children to school and daycare every morning. Elias had arranged it without being asked. CJ pulled up in the Escalade, helped Ezra into his car seat, waited while Layla buckled herself in, nodded at Malik. They rode in comfortable silence. CJ didn't ask questions. The kids didn't explain. It was a routine that built itself in the space between need and dignity. Imani was exhausted. But it was a different kind of exhaustion now. The kind that comes from building something instead of surviving something. The kind that has a direction. She fell asleep at the kitchen table more than once. Forehead on her textbook, pen still in her hand. Both times she woke up with a blanket over her shoulders that she hadn't put there. Malik. Of course it was Malik. Elias visited once that first month. He brought a picture book about oceans for Layla, a set of building blocks for Ezra, a gift card for the bookstore on Union Avenue for Malik, because Malik was the kind of kid who'd rather pick his own book than be handed one. Layla showed Elias around the apartment like a real estate agent conducting a tour. "This is the kitchen. This is where Mama studies. This is my room. I share with Ezra, but that's okay because he's small." Then she handed Elias a piece of paper, a drawing. 4 figures standing in front of a house. A woman in blue scrubs, a tall boy, a smaller girl with butterflies in her hair, a baby, And next to them, a tall man in a suit, drawn slightly apart but clearly part of the group. Layla had written at the top, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, "My family and Mr. Elias." Elias looked at the drawing. He smiled. He said, "Thank you." He folded it carefully and put it in his coat pocket. Then he walked to the Escalade, sat in the back seat, and didn't move for 10 minutes. CJ sat in the driver's seat. He didn't start the engine. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't look in the mirror. He just sat. Because CJ knew. The drawing had 4 figures and 1 tall man. Serena would have been the 5th. Serena would have been the one kneeling beside Layla, adding more butterflies. Elias pressed the drawing flat against his knee with both hands, smoothed the creases, and stared at it until the faces blurred. Some gifts break you from the inside. A 7-year-old girl who had been sleeping in a car weeks ago had just drawn a family portrait that included a man she had met twice. She had given him something no amount of money could buy: a place in a picture, a belonging, and the empty space where Serena should have stood, burned like a wound that had never been allowed to scar. Several weeks into the program, Imani was halfway through her LPN studies. Scores in the top 10%. Clinical evaluations excellent. Her instructor told her she had the hands of someone who had been doing this work for years. She had. She had been doing it for years. She just hadn't been paid for the skill level she actually operated at. She came home one evening and found a woman sitting on the hallway floor outside apartment 114, and 1 floor below hers. The woman was young, maybe 28. She had 2 children with her. A boy around 4 sitting quietly beside her, holding a stuffed bear with 1 arm missing. A baby girl, maybe 8 months, sleeping in a car seat on the hallway floor. The woman's eyes were red. She wasn't crying anymore. She had already finished. Her face had the look Imani recognized instantly. The look of someone who had run out of options and was sitting in the first place that felt like it had walls. Imani knelt down. "Hey, you okay?" The woman looked up, startled, guarded, the same way Imani had looked at CJ through a fogged window weeks ago. "We're fine," the woman said. Imani almost smiled, almost because she knew exactly what that word meant when spoken by a woman on a hallway floor with 2 children and nowhere to go. "I didn't ask if you're fine," Imani said gently. "What's your name?" "Kiana. Kiana Williams." Imani sat down on the floor beside her, right there in the hallway, back against the wall. 2 women who didn't know each other sitting on cheap carpet in a building that was supposed to house people who had nowhere else. "I'm Imani. I live upstairs. How long have you been here?" Kiana's jaw tightened. "Since this morning. We got evicted last week. I've been staying at the waiting room at Regional Medical. They let you sit in the chairs overnight if you don't cause trouble." Imani looked at the boy with the 1-armed bear, then at the baby sleeping in the car seat, then at Kiana, whose hands were shaking the way hands shake when they've been gripping something invisible for too long. "Have you eaten?" Kiana hesitated. That hesitation said everything. That night, Imani cooked rice and beans and cornbread. Nothing fancy. The food of people who know how to make a dollar stretch across 4 plates. She carried it downstairs in a pot with a towel wrapped around the handle. Kiana ate slowly like someone who had forgotten that food could be warm. Her son ate fast the way children eat when they're not sure when the next meal is coming. The baby slept through it. Over the next weeks, Imani did what no one expected. She split her food stamps. Not evenly. She couldn't afford evenly, but she cooked extra portions several nights a week and brought them down. She called CJ and asked carefully, respectfully, if there was room in the daycare arrangement for 2 more children. CJ didn't ask Elias first. He made the call himself. And on her 1 night off, Imani sat with Kiana at the kitchen table and helped her fill out housing assistance applications, form after form. Emergency housing, Section 8, rapid rehousing. The same forms Imani had filled out weeks ago. The same system that had told her waitlist, waitlist, waitlist. But this time, Kiana had someone sitting beside her, pointing at the right boxes, explaining the language, translating bureaucracy into something a 28-year-old mother could actually navigate. Elias found out through CJ. Not because CJ reported it, because Elias asked how Imani was doing, and CJ told the truth. She's feeding another family, splitting what she's got, spending her 1 night off filling out paperwork for a woman she met in the hallway weeks ago. Elias drove to Memphis the following weekend. He sat across from Imani in her kitchen while Ezra napped and Layla colored at the table and Malik read in his room with the door closed. "You barely have enough for yourself," Elias said. "Why are you giving to someone else?" Imani looked at him. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think about it. The answer came out the way truth does when it has been living inside you so long it doesn't need rehearsal. "Because weeks ago I was her, and somebody knocked on my window. I can't walk past her window and pretend I don't hear the same sound." Elias sat with that. He sat with it for a long time. Imani continued, "You want to know the difference between charity and what CJ did that night? Charity is giving something you won't miss. CJ gave me something that cost him nothing, but meant everything. He gave me the knowledge that someone saw me, that I wasn't invisible, that a stranger could look at a fogged-up window and care enough to knock." She paused. "Kiana's kids are the same as mine. They're not different. They're not less. They're just stuck in the same system I was stuck in. And the only thing standing between them and a floor to sleep on is someone who remembers what it felt like to not have one." Elias looked at Layla's drawing still pinned to the refrigerator. 4 figures and a tall man. He looked at the pot on the stove with tomorrow's leftovers already portioned into containers. 2 for upstairs, 2 for downstairs. He looked at Imani Okoro, 34 years old, CNA, making $14.50 an hour, halfway through an LPN, raising 3 children alone and feeding a stranger's family with food she couldn't spare because someone had knocked on her window, and she decided that kindness wasn't something you received and kept. It was something you received and passed on. 2 days after that conversation, Elias flew back to Atlanta. He didn't go to his office. He didn't go to his penthouse. He told CJ to take him to Broad Street, to the Serena Adeyemi family shelter. CJ pulled up to the curb. He didn't turn off the engine. He looked in the mirror. "You want me to come with you?" "No," Elias said. He stared at the building through the window. The sign above the door. His daughter's name in gold letters on a blue background. 3 years old, that sign. He had approved the font. He had approved the color. He had approved everything from the outside. He had never seen it from the inside. He got out. CJ stayed. The front door was glass with a security buzzer. Elias pressed it. A woman's voice came through the speaker, warm and tired. "Can I help you?" "My name is Elias Adeyemi. I'd like to come in." A pause, then the door buzzed open. The lobby smelled like floor cleaner and cooked food and the particular warmth of a building that runs all day because the people inside it have been cold for too long. A front desk with a sign-in sheet, a hallway with rooms on either side, a common area at the end with couches and a television and a bookshelf and a rug with cartoon animals that was worn thin from children's feet. On the wall behind the front desk was a corkboard. Volunteer photos, staff schedules, donation acknowledgments, and in the center, a framed 8x10 photograph, Serena Adeyemi. Scrubs, stethoscope around her neck. That smile, the one that made everyone who saw it feel like they had been noticed by someone who actually cared. Below the photo, a small brass plaque. "In loving memory of Serena Adeyemi, who held hands and hearts in equal measure." Elias stood in front of that photograph. He didn't move. His hands hung at his sides. His breathing was slow and deliberate, the kind of breathing a person does when they're trying to stay inside their body instead of running out of it. The shelter director appeared beside him, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and a lanyard with too many keys. "Mr. Adeyemi, we've been hoping you'd visit." Elias didn't look away from the photograph. "I should have come sooner." She nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't tell him it was okay. She just stood beside him and let the sentence exist. "Your daughter sat in that corner every Thursday evening," the director said, pointing to a spot near the bookshelf. "She'd bring her own books, picture books mostly. The kids would line up. She'd read to them for an hour, sometimes 2. She did the voices, animals, monsters, princesses. She did them all." Elias's chest tightened. "There was one girl," and the director continued. "Destiny, 4 years old when Serena started volunteering. She called Serena Miss Sunshine. Every Thursday, she'd wait by the door starting early, even though Serena didn't arrive until later. She just wanted to be first in line." Elias swallowed. He didn't trust his voice. "Destiny is 7 now. She's still here. She still talks about Miss Sunshine." "And it is so." Elias looked at the corner, a small chair, a rug, the bookshelf. He could see her there, not as a memory, as a presence. Serena sitting cross-legged on that rug, a picture book open on her knees doing a voice for a grumpy bear that made a little girl laugh. He walked to the chair. He sat down. It was small, made for someone much younger or much shorter. His knees came up too high. He didn't care. He sat in his daughter's chair, in his daughter's shelter, in the corner where she had spent her Thursday evenings, doing the one thing she loved most, holding someone's hand on their worst day. He spoke to the photograph on the wall, quietly, barely above a whisper, not for anyone else, just for her. "I'm here, baby girl. I'm sorry it took me so long." He sat in that chair for many minutes. The director left him alone. The hallway hummed with the sounds of a shelter going about its evening, dishes clattering in the kitchen, a television playing cartoons, a child's laughter from somewhere down the hall. Elias didn't cry. He had done his crying. This wasn't grief. This was something else, something quieter and harder and more important than grief. This was arrival, 3 years of running, 3 years of building walls between himself and every person who reminded him of what he had lost. 3 years of signing checks and skipping visits and telling himself that distance was the same as strength. It wasn't. Distance was just distance. And strength, real strength, was sitting in a too small chair in a shelter that smelled like floor cleaner and letting yourself remember the person you loved without flinching. Serena's voice one last time, clear as a bell. "Dad, you don't have to fix it. You just have to show up." He had shown up. He was here. And for the first time in 3 years, that was enough. Imani passed the NCLE-XPN. She was sitting in the testing center on Poplar Avenue staring at the screen when the words appeared. "Congratulations, you have passed." She read it twice, then a third time. Then she closed her eyes and pressed her hands flat against the desk and breathed. Many exams. Hundreds of flashcards she had made by hand at the kitchen table after the kids were asleep. Clinical rotations where she had worked long days on top of her CNA shifts and still come home to help Layla with her spelling words. Nights where the textbook blurred because her eyes couldn't stay open, but she turned the page anyway, because turning the page was the only thing between $14.50 an hour and $25. She walked out of the testing center into the parking lot. The sun was low. The air was warm. Memphis in early spring, the kind of evening that smells like cut grass and possibility. The Honda Civic was parked in the third row. She had kept it, not because she needed it, because she needed to remember. Imani opened the driver's side door and sat down. She didn't start the engine. She just sat there, hands on the wheel, the way she had sat for many nights in a church parking lot with 3 children breathing behind her. She looked at the back seat. The blanket was gone. The backpacks were gone. The snacks from Dollar General were gone, but the seat was the same. The crack in the windshield was the same. The smell faintly underneath everything else was the same. She sat there for a long time. "We made it," she said out loud, to no one, to everyone, to the woman she had been weeks ago who didn't know if she could do this, to the woman she had been in those hard nights who thought the world had run out of room for her, to her grandmother who had cleaned houses in Nashville for 40 years and never complained, to Malik, who had pushed a car in the dark without being asked, to Layla, who had drawn a family with butterflies and included a man she had met twice, to Ezra, who laughed at everything because he didn't know yet that the world could be cruel. We made it. As. The following Monday, Imani started her new position, licensed practical nurse at Memphis Regional Medical Center, $24.80 an hour, full medical, dental, and vision benefits for herself and 3 dependents, a fixed schedule day shift, home before the kids got back from school. For the first time in her life, Imani Okoro had health insurance. For the first time, a doctor's visit for Ezra's cough didn't mean choosing between medicine and groceries. For the first time, she looked at a paycheck, and the number on it was larger than the number she owed. She paid rent on the apartment herself starting the 4th month. Full amount. No subsidy, no assistance. Her name on the lease, her name on the mailbox, her name on the utility bill that arrived every month, like proof that she existed in a system that had once pretended she didn't. Elias called when he found out she had declined the continued support. He wasn't surprised. He had expected it. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "The offer stands as long as you need it." Imani's voice was steady. "You gave me a period of support. I'm giving myself the rest." Silence on the line. Not awkward, respectful, the silence of a man recognizing that the strongest thing he could do was step back. Then Elias said quietly, The period of support was never about the apartment, Imani. It was about you believing you deserved a foundation to stand on. Imani looked around her kitchen, Layla's drawings on the refrigerator, Ezra's blocks scattered across the living room floor, Malik's basketball shoes by the front door, muddy from practice, a pot of rice on the stove, a textbook on the counter that she no longer needed but hadn't put away yet because it reminded her of what she had done. "I know," she said, "and I'm standing. My kids have a home, a real one with their names on the mailbox." 1 year later, Malik made the basketball team at Ridgeway Middle School, 6th grade, starting point guard. He wasn't the tallest, he wasn't the fastest, but he was the most aware. The coach said he played like someone who had spent his whole life watching, reading people, anticipating what they would do before they did it. The coach didn't know how right he was. The first game of the season, Imani sat in the bleachers with Ezra on her lap and Layla beside her drawing the court in her sketchbook. Malik walked out in his jersey. Number 7, blue and white. His last name printed across the back in block letters, Okoro. He stopped at the edge of the court, looked down at the jersey, touched the letters with his fingertips. Then he stood still for a few seconds, not nervous, not performing, just reading his own name on something official, something that belonged to him, something that said he was part of something larger than a car in a parking lot. Then he ran onto the court, and he played like a kid who finally had room to be a kid. Layla entered the school art contest. The theme was home. She worked on her piece for weeks at the kitchen table using colored pencils. Imani bought them from the art supply store on Highland. Not Dollar General, not the cheapest option, but the good ones because Layla had earned the good ones. The drawing showed a Honda Civic, 4 people inside, a woman in the driver's seat, a boy in the passenger seat, 2 smaller figures in the back, one holding a stuffed animal, stars through the windshield, and written across the bottom in Layla's careful 7-year-old handwriting, "Home is where Mom is." She won 2nd place. The ribbon hung on the refrigerator next to the drawing she had given Elias a year ago, 2 pictures of home, one drawn from a car, one drawn from a kitchen table. The distance between them was a period of support and one knock on a window. Ezra started pre-K in September. He was 4 now, loud, fearless, completely unaware that months ago he had been sleeping in a car seat in a church parking lot. On his first morning, he clung to Imani's leg at the classroom door and refused to let go. His teacher knelt down and offered her hand. Ezra buried his face in Imani's knee. Imani knelt beside him. She took his face in both hands, looked him straight in the eyes. "Mama will be right here when you come back. I promise. Mama always comes back." Ezra studied her face the way 3-year-olds do, looking for the truth behind the words. Whatever he found was enough. He let go. He took the teacher's hand. He walked inside without looking back. Imani stood in the hallway for a moment after the door closed. She pressed her back against the wall. She breathed. "Mama always comes back." She had said it like a promise. It was. It had always been. Through many hard nights and shelters that said no, and a sister who couldn't help, and a car that ran out of gas, and a parking lot where nobody came, she always came back. 3 floors below Imani's apartment, Kiana Williams had her own lease now. 2-bedroom unit. Her son started kindergarten at the same school as Ezra. She was enrolled in the CNA program at Southwest Tennessee, the same school Imani had attended. She studied at her kitchen table at night, the way Imani had studied with cold coffee and flashcards and the particular determination of a woman who had been given a chance and refused to waste it. The chain had not stopped. CJ knocked on Imani's window. Imani knocked on Kiana's door. Kiana would knock on someone else's eventually. That's how it works. Kindness doesn't expire. It compounds. Elias flew to Chicago one evening. Folake Adeyemi was sitting at her kitchen table in the house on Harper Avenue in Hyde Park when he arrived. 78 years old, small, alert, a cup of ginger tea in her hands and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked exactly the way she had always looked to Elias, like a woman who had seen everything the world could throw and decided to outlast it through sheer refusal to sit down. She hugged him at the door the way she always did, both arms, full grip. The hug of a woman who had spent too many years working too many hours to take physical contact for granted. They sat at the table. Elias told her about Imani, about the Honda Civic and the 3 children and the church parking lot and the many nights, about CJ crossing the street, About the hotel, about the period of support and the LPN program and the apartment and Kiana and the chain. Flake listened without interrupting. She held her tea with both hands and watched her son's face as he spoke the way she had watched him since he was a boy, reading what lived behind his words. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You remember the parking lot?" she said. Elias nodded. "The grocery store on Halstead. I told you that night. Just tonight," Folake said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. "But it wasn't just one night." "I know, Mama." 3 weeks, Folake said. 21 nights. And every morning I drove you to school, and I prayed you wouldn't tell anyone. I prayed you wouldn't be ashamed of me. I prayed you'd forget." Elias reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were thin and warm and strong, the same hands that had braided his hair in the front seat of an Oldsmobile using a comb from the glove box. "I didn't forget," he said. "I know you didn't," Folake said. "That's why you stopped." Elias looked at her. "You didn't help that woman because you're rich, Elias. You helped her because you remember. That's the only difference between people who help and people who walk past. Memory. You remember what it sounded like when I cried at night and thought you were sleeping. You remember what the car smelled like. You remember what it felt like to be a child who knew his mother was pretending. And when you saw that woman in that car with those children, you remembered, and you couldn't walk past." Elias's throat tightened. He squeezed her hand. "Serena would have loved Amani," he said quietly. Folake smiled, the kind of smile that holds grief and pride in equal measure. "Serena did love Amani," she said. "She loved every person like Amani she ever met, every mother in those shelters, every child sleeping on a floor, every woman pretending everything was fine while the walls came down around her. That's why she became a nurse. That's why she volunteered. That's why she sat in that corner every Thursday and read picture books until her voice was hoarse." Folake paused. She looked at her son. "And that's why you are who you are now. Not because of the money, not because of the company, because you remember, because Serena remembered, because I remembered. We are people who remember, Elias. That's what I gave you. Not wealth, not opportunity, memory. The memory of what it's like to need help and not have it. And the choice every single day to make sure someone else doesn't have to carry that same memory alone." "Yeah, sorry. Easy." Elias sat with his mother in the kitchen in Hyde Park, holding her hand across a table that had held 40 years of meals and conversations and prayers, and felt something settle inside him that had been unsettled for 3 years. Not closure. He didn't believe in closure. Closure was a word for people who had never lost someone that mattered, but something close, something like peace, the kind of peace that comes from knowing that the people you love don't disappear when they die. They live in what you do next. Folake squeezed his hand one more time. "Now finish your tea," she said. "It's getting cold." Imani drove to work one morning in early March. The streets were empty, streetlights still on. The radio played low, something soft, something that sounded like the kind of song you'd hear in a kitchen where someone was cooking and didn't care if anyone was listening. She took Lamar Avenue, the same route she had driven many times before. Past the gas station where CJ had stopped, past the Shell, where a man in an Escalade had sat in the back seat and decided to cross a street, past the church with the sign that said, "All are welcome." She slowed down. In the church parking lot, a car sat alone, an old sedan, windows fogged from the inside, condensation on every pane, the same fog that only forms when people have been breathing inside a closed space for hours. Imani pulled over. She turned off the engine. She sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, looking at that car. She thought about CJ, standing outside her window in the dark, hands raised, palms open. "I didn't ask if you're fine. I asked how long." She thought about Elias. "My mother was a nurse, too." She thought about Kiana, about food stamps split in half and nights spent filling out forms. She thought about Malik, 10 years old, pushing a car down Lamar Avenue in silence. About Layla asking when they were going home. About Ezra's cough in the cold. She thought about many nights. About 3 children who thought they were camping. About a knock on a window that changed everything. Imani opened the door. She stepped out into the early morning air. Memphis in March, cool but not cold. The sky just beginning to lighten at the edges. She walked across the parking lot. Her nurse's shoes were quiet on the asphalt. Her scrubs were clean. Her badge was clipped to her chest. Imani Okoro, LPN, Memphis Regional Medical Center. She reached the car. She stood beside the driver's side window. She could see shapes through the fog. She could hear breathing. She raised her hand and she knocked. Elias didn't save Imani. CJ didn't save Imani. Imani saved herself. What they gave her wasn't money or a home. It was a period of support, believing she was worth standing on solid ground. And what Imani gave back was something no amount of money could buy. Proof that kindness doesn't stop with the person who receives it. It moves. It knocks on the next window. It remembers. Many nights in a car. 3 kids who thought they were camping. 1 knock on a window. That's all it took. Not to change a life, but to remind someone their life was worth changing.